Nietzsche didn't view marriage as a romantic ideal or as a promise of eternal happiness, but as a stage where hidden forces reveal themselves: power, domination, repetition, and even decay. What we call love is often nothing more than a mask for social, biological, and psychological needs. He believed that matrimony could be both a prison and a field of creation. Everything would depend on the consciousness and strength of those involved. But could it be that by looking deeply into this institution, we discover more about our illusions than about our truths? What if marriage were less about union and more about survival? What if it were simply a sophisticated form of mutual control, disguised as love and promise? Throughout this journey, we'll dive into Nietzsche's reflections to question the foundations of something many consider sacred. This won't be a light stroll. Prepare yourself to face uncomfortable truths about love, desire, fidelity, and marital routine. If this reflection touches your most intimate doubts, subscribe and follow us to the end. Perhaps by crossing through this dark mirror, you'll never see marriage the same way again. Nietzsche believed that many institutions humanity considers sacred are nothing more than fragile constructions sustained by customs and interests. Marriage is one of them. From early on, we're taught to believe that life only gains meaning when we find the right person, someone with whom to share dreams, routine, and destiny. The promise is simple: emotional security, material stability, and somehow lasting happiness. But the philosopher invites us to look beyond the surface and question, is this promise really the fruit of love, or just a silent agreement to maintain social order? Marriage, for Nietzsche, emerges less as a celebration of passion and more as society's attempt to control dangerous impulses like sexual desire and the craving for freedom. By creating a social contract around love, cultures transformed something chaotic and unpredictable into something manageable. Passion, which should be free, ends up confined in roles, obligations, and expectations. Thus, what seems like spontaneous union often is nothing more than adaptation to a pre-written script. Think about how many marriages exist not because two people freely chose to unite, but because family pressure, fear of loneliness, or financial necessity weighed more than genuine desire. How many couples, when walking down the aisle, aren't actually just obeying a tradition that guarantees social respect and recognition, rather than surrendering to an authentic, existential adventure? Nietzsche would call this collective illusion, believing that by repeating the same rituals, we'll be different from past generations who already suffered with the same misunderstandings. The philosopher saw in this process a domestication of the individual. Marriage often serves to tame vital forces that could express themselves in unpredictable directions. Wild youth, with its desires and uncertainties, is led to sign a contract that promises stability but charges a price: the renunciation of spontaneity. Society, by supporting this pact, ensures that citizens follow a predictable line: work, marry, have children, keeping the social machine functioning. The individual, however, pays with their own inner freedom. Nietzsche didn't deny that life together could bring joy, but he pointed out the risk of believing that marriage, by itself, was a guarantee of fulfillment. He denounced the danger of idealization, this belief that matrimony would be the final solution to existence's emptiness. The problem isn't just in external rules, but in internal self-deception. We project onto the other the salvation we don't find within ourselves. We marry hoping someone will fill the gap of meaning, when in truth, each human being is thrown into the task of creating this meaning for themselves. Our time repeats in other forms this same mistake. Many still enter marriages believing they'll find the answer to their anxieties there, but end up discovering that the partner isn't a redeemer, just another human being with frailties, fears, and contradictions. This frustration feeds silent resentments because what was sold as eternal love proves itself in practice as difficult cohabitation, full of personality clashes, invisible disputes, and heavy silences. Nietzsche, with his relentless lucidity, forces us to admit that much of marriage isn't love, but convenience. It's not desire, but fear of being alone. It's not freedom, but conformity to the other's gaze. He unmasks the romantic discourse, revealing the social machinery that sustains it. For the philosopher, the great tragedy lies precisely in the fact that we call love what is often just habit, necessity, or fear. When thinking about this, we can imagine the discomfort of those who dare to live outside this model. Those who don't marry, or who decide to break a marriage, are usually viewed with suspicion, as if they were denying something essential to life. This shows how much this institution still carries with it an aura of sacredness. But for Nietzsche, precisely there the prison reveals itself. When something becomes so sacred that it can no longer be questioned, it's because it stopped being free choice and transformed into dogma. Perhaps the question the philosopher would like us to ask is this: when we choose marriage, are we actually choosing ourselves, our truth, or just repeating a pattern imposed by the collective? If the answer is the second, then there's no freedom, but only submission. And for Nietzsche, living without inner freedom is living a life that doesn't belong to us. Marriage as social illusion, therefore, isn't just criticism of matrimony itself, but a denunciation against all forms of life lived by inertia, without reflection. He summons us not to accept the promise of ready-made happiness, but to look at our own creative forces and ask, what kind of life do I want to build? Marriage can be part of it, but should never be the comfortable disguise for the cowardice of facing existence's abyss. Nietzsche was never fooled by romanticism's illusions. For him, love wasn't a pure essence, much less a miracle that suspends time. Love, as we experience it, is deeply linked to desire, and desire in turn is an ambiguous force, both creative and destructive. When two beings are attracted to each other, this attraction may seem like a meeting of souls, but at the root there's something more instinctive, connected to the body, to vital impulse, to the game of power and possession. The problem, according to Nietzsche, is that we transform this raw energy into a delicate mask called eternal love. Marriage, in this sense, is the crystallization of this illusion. Passion, which is born uncertain and ephemeral, is forced to assume the form of a definitive pact. Desire, which moves in unpredictable waves, is enclosed in promises of fidelity and stability. What was flame, intensity, and risk converts into contract, routine, and obligation. Nietzsche looked at this transformation with irony. How can we believe that an emotion as transitory as desire can sustain something as lasting as a lifetime together? He said we confuse passion's momentary intensity with eternity. When someone falls in love, they feel nothing can destroy that connection. It's as if the entire world conspired to prove that that encounter was inevitable, written in the stars. But passion is, by nature, an intoxication. It intensifies the senses, clouds reason, and creates illusions of infinitude. The error is transforming this passing state into the foundation of an institution that demands permanence. Marriage is born, often, from this initial delirium, and one pays dearly when passion's fog dissipates. Nietzsche didn't condemn desire itself. On the contrary, he saw it as vital force, as expression of the will to live. What he attacked was the lie we construct about it. By calling eternal love what is in truth a passing combustion, we deceive ourselves and deceive the other. Thus, two people enter matrimony believing they'll live forever in that intensity, but soon realize the flame transforms into ashes. Then resentment arises. You're not like you used to be. However, the error isn't in the other, but in the illusion we projected onto them. In daily life, This is easy to perceive. Think of couples who, in the first months, can't stand being away from each other, exchange intense declarations, believe nothing will ever separate them. After some years, the relationship is already marked by trivial discussions, by silence at the table, by repetition of the same gestures. Many interpret this change as failure, but Nietzsche would say it's just the unveiling of truth. Desire is transitory, and trying to fix it is like trying to hold water with your hands. Marriage, then, is sustained by masks. The mask of initial passion, which promises eternity, the mask of fidelity, which tries to control impulses that naturally expand in various directions, and the mask of romantic love, which covers with beautiful words what is, at its root, an impulse of possession. Because desire, for Nietzsche, isn't just the search for fusion with the other, but also the will to possess, to dominate, to make the other part of oneself. The danger is that when we don't recognize this dimension, we end up imprisoned in unrealistic expectations. By unmasking these illusions, Nietzsche didn't want to destroy love, but to free it from the lies that weaken it. To love, for him, shouldn't be pretending eternity, but accepting transitoriness. It shouldn't be possession, but encounter. It shouldn't be anesthesia against loneliness, but courage to share life knowing nothing is guaranteed. Marriage, when it relies on the illusion that desire will never change, is condemned to become prison. But when it's built with the consciousness that desire is unstable flame, it can transform into something truer, more honest, perhaps even freer. Perhaps Nietzsche's greatest provocation is this. What if what we call love is nothing more than a disguise for sexual instinct and the need for security? What if all the passion stories that feed our imagination are nothing more than poetic masks for an impulse we don't know how to face head-on? Accepting this possibility isn't destroying love, but understanding it in its essence. Only when we remove the masks can we see if the other really is a life partner, or just a mirror where we project our desires and our needs. Marriage, when based on this mask, becomes a pact of blindness. Two people pretend not to see the truth to maintain the illusion that love will be eternal. Nietzsche invites us to tear this curtain. And perhaps the question he would leave hanging is this: do you prefer to live in the comfort of illusion, or in the courage of facing that love, like everything in life, is made of flows, losses and transformations? Nietzsche saw life as a flow of forces, a constant movement of overcoming and creation. For him, living fully meant being always in transformation, reinventing oneself, cultivating intensity. The problem is that marriage, as socially structured, frequently opposes this dynamism. Instead of opening space for change, it tends to fix roles, crystallize gestures, repeat the same rituals. And in this process, routine becomes the spirit's greatest enemy. The beginning of a relationship is usually marked by novelty. Each meeting, each conversation, each discovery brings freshness and energy. But with time, daily cohabitation begins to revolve around repetitive tasks. Paying bills, organizing the house, meeting schedules, dividing responsibilities. The flame that once burned in intensity now gets lost in the weight of custom. For Nietzsche, this is the danger. Life stops being lived as creation and starts being endured as habit. He said that habit is a form of anesthesia. It prevents the individual from perceiving the depth of their existence, making them live on autopilot. In marriage, this manifests in repeated silences, mechanical gestures, kisses given without desire, good mornings that no longer carry affection, just formality. Gradually, the relationship stops being an encounter of two free beings and becomes the gear of a predictable machine. Nietzsche believed this type of routine kills the spirit because it eliminates creative tension. Life needs challenges, small ruptures, instability to generate growth. When the couple settles into an eternal cycle of repetitions, the relationship stops being a field of transformation and becomes prison. It's at this point that resentment, apathy, and even contempt arise. Not because love has ended, but because the spirit was suffocated by the weight of repetition. We can easily observe this in daily life. Think of couples who have lived together for years and no longer talk about anything beyond what to eat for dinner or work problems. The relationship, which at the beginning was moved by discoveries and dreams, shrinks until it fits in the narrow space of obligations. Creativity, which should sustain life together, is replaced by predictability. Nietzsche would say there's no authentic life there, only survival. And what's most disturbing is that many believe this routine is proof of maturity, as if true love were that which, after initial passion, settles into the silence of custom. Nietzsche, however, would challenge this vision. For him, there's no virtue in accepting a life of sterile repetitions. To live is to expand, to renew oneself. If the relationship can't accompany this movement, it becomes weight that drags the spirit downward. Routine, therefore, isn't just a detail of marriage, but a test for the vitality of those involved. A strong spirit is capable of transforming even repetition into creation, reinventing gestures, rediscovering the other, keeping alive the flame of difference. A weakened spirit surrenders to automatism, contenting itself with existing without really living. Marriage, in this case, stops being a union of creative forces and becomes a pact of resignation. Nietzsche believed the great danger of routine is making us forget who we are. Trapped in the cycle of obligations, we stop asking ourselves what we really desire, what really moves us. Conjugal life becomes an excuse for mediocrity, as if it were impossible to continue growing within it. How many couples remain together not for love, but for fear of breaking with the security of routine? And how many justify this choice saying, "That's just how it is," without realizing they're actually renouncing their own vitality? The philosopher didn't defend instability for simple chaos, but the remembrance that living is more than repeating. Marriage can be a space of creation and renewal, but only if both have the courage to face monotony and not let themselves be swallowed by habit. Otherwise, routine becomes a kind of death in life, a silence that slowly consumes what was once vibrant. Perhaps the question Nietzsche would like to leave before this scenario is this: do you love life enough to reinvent your relationship every day? Or are you just conforming to the comfort of repetition? This is the thin line between marriage that strengthens the spirit and that which destroys it. Nietzsche saw marriage not just as a romantic union, but as a stage of forces, a battlefield where power, dependence, and domination interweave subtly. For him, every human relationship is crossed by the will to power, this fundamental force that moves us to expand, dominate, affirm our own existence. In matrimony, this will doesn't disappear. On the contrary, it gains even clearer contours. Behind the vows of love and care hides a silent struggle. Who leads, who yields, who molds the other to fit in their own world? At the beginning of the relationship, this dispute can camouflage itself under passion. Gestures of surrender, concessions, sacrifices are interpreted as signs of love. But with time, truth emerges. Each one tries, consciously or unconsciously, to establish territory, dictate rules, impose patterns of cohabitation. One partner may exercise economic power, the other emotional power. One may command through silence, the other through insistence. The dynamic is always asymmetric, even when masked by the idea of equality. Nietzsche would say that marriage is inevitably an arena where the dispute between two wills to power is fought. This reflects in small daily scenes. Who decides where the couple goes? Who defines how money will be spent? Who determines the house's routine? Who gives up their own projects to support the others? Behind these banal choices, there's always a power relationship. Often, this asymmetry remains hidden because both prefer to believe in the narrative of balance. But the philosopher provokes us to see what's really at stake. There's no neutrality in marriage. There are always movements of affirmation and submission. Nietzsche also pointed out the risk of dependence. Marriage, by uniting two lives, often creates bonds that go beyond affection and transform into invisible chains. One partner can become dependent on the other, financially, emotionally, or socially. This dependence feeds deep resentments. The one who depends feels diminished, and the one who sustains feels imprisoned. A cycle of guilt, demands, and veiled domination then arises. The relationship, which should be a field of mutual growth, converts into a theater of power disguised as care. Perhaps the darkest aspect Nietzsche would reveal is that even love can be a form of domination. To love often means desiring that the other adjust to our expectations, correspond to the image we project onto them. When we say, "I love you as you are," we often mean, "I love you while you continue being what pleases me." Love, in this sense, can be a subtle way of imprisoning the other in a fixed identity, preventing them from transforming. Marriage, by institutionalizing this bond, strengthens this control mechanism even more. Nietzsche saw in this a danger for the free spirit. Marriage, when reduced to domination and dependence, doesn't allow the individual to expand. They become hostage to the other's gaze, conditioned by roles and expectations that suffocate their creative potency. To live fully, said the philosopher, one needs courage to face solitude, not to surrender to the comfort of submission, to affirm one's own singularity even before the demands of a relationship. But this doesn't mean marriage is condemned to always be a prison. Nietzsche believed the struggle of forces can also be a motor of growth. When two wills to power meet without one nullifying the other, but both challenging each other mutually, the relationship stops being domination and becomes creative confrontation. In this type of union, each partner doesn't seek to mold the other, but to provoke them to become stronger, more authentic, deeper. The central question, then, isn't to eliminate power from the relationship because it will always exist, but to transform it. The challenge is to prevent the will to power from degrading into tyranny or submission and make it rise into fecund confrontation. Nietzsche believed only this way could marriage be something beyond a prison. It could become an arena of growth where each awakens in the other forces that alone they might never have dared to touch. And here arises the uncomfortable question the philosopher would leave for us. In your relationship, are you being strengthened by the other's presence, or are you being slowly weakened by domination and dependence? This is the line that separates love as liberation from love as prison. Up to this point, Nietzsche's vision of marriage seems marked by denunciation, social illusion, mask of love, suffocating routine, power games. But the philosopher doesn't limit himself to criticism. His thought always points to a possibility of overcoming, to a path where the human being, instead of losing themselves in decadence, manages to transform their own existence into a work of art. In this sense, marriage, despite all risks, can also be a field of creation for the free spirit. Nietzsche believed the human being must learn to live without comforting illusions, facing life as it is, fragile, transitory, full of pains and uncertainties. This doesn't mean living in pessimism, but in courage. Marriage, when stripped of its masks and romanticizations, can become a conscious choice, an experience lived without self-deception. It wouldn't be then a promise of eternity, but an alliance between two beings who know of transitoriness and even so choose to walk together. In this scenario, matrimony stops being prison and converts into challenge. To love wouldn't be to possess, but to accompany the other in their transformation. Living together wouldn't be submitting to habit, but reinventing oneself daily. Fidelity, in this case, wouldn't be the blind obligation to deny all impulses, but the conscious decision to affirm a bond that strengthens instead of weakening. For Nietzsche, only this way could marriage escape resentment and mediocrity, transforming itself into an exercise of greatness. This is where the concept of free spirit enters. The free spirit is one who doesn't accept ready-made truths, who doesn't settle into conventions, who dares to create their own meaning for life. In marriage, this would mean rejecting scripts imposed by society, marrying only because it's expected, staying together only out of fear or convenience, and choosing to remain in the relationship because it really expresses the force of living. Two people of free spirit don't unite to imprison themselves, but to challenge each other mutually. We can imagine this type of relationship as a constant dialogue, not a dialogue of words only, but of existences. Each partner becomes mirror and provocation for the other, not allowing them to settle, instigating them to go beyond. This can mean supporting dreams, but also questioning conformisms. It can mean sharing affections, but also exposing frailties. In this type of marriage, there's no space for masks, because both know that only truth, however uncomfortable it may be, can sustain the relationship. Nietzsche said that truly loving someone is desiring not only what they are today, but what they can become tomorrow. This love doesn't paralyze, doesn't domesticate, it propels. In the context of marriage, this means seeing the partner not as a possession, but as an unfinished project, a being in constant becoming. The bond becomes then a pact of growth, not being together to repeat the past, but to create the future. Of course, this path isn't easy. It requires maturity to bear solitude even within the relationship, not to transform the other into an existential crutch. It requires courage to accept that the partner will change, perhaps in unpredictable ways, and that true love is accompanying this transformation, even if it makes us uncomfortable. And it requires strength to break with social expectations that define what a marriage should be. Marriage, in this sense, isn't a refuge, but a philosophical adventure. Nietzsche saw in this type of union the possibility of something rare and grandiose. Two wills to power walking side by side, not to nullify themselves, but to expand together. This marriage doesn't deny risk, doesn't pretend desire will be eternal, doesn't hide behind routine. It looks at all this head-on, and instead of shrinking, transforms it into an opportunity for creation. Just as the artist creates from chaos, the creator couple transforms the inevitable tensions of life together into vital force. The question, therefore, isn't whether marriage is good or bad in itself. For Nietzsche, it's like any human experience. It can be a field of decadence or elevation, of prison or freedom. Everything depends on the consciousness and strength of the individuals involved. A fragile spirit will make marriage their excuse not to grow. A strong spirit will transform it into a path of overcoming. Perhaps the question Nietzsche would leave us at this point is, are you willing to live marriage as a space of creation, facing its shadows without illusions? Or do you prefer to take refuge in the comfort of masks? The answer to this question defines whether the relationship will be prison or liberation, decadence or greatness. We arrive at the most uncomfortable point of reflection. For Nietzsche, marriage reveals less about love itself and more about our illusions. It functions as a mirror that exposes our frailties, our masks, our needs for belonging and security. The dark truth is that often we don't marry for love, but for fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of social judgment, fear of facing life without a ready script. Marriage thus becomes a refuge against existence's chaos. But Nietzsche would ask, at what cost? When we live under illusions, the price is always freedom. We accept predefined roles, renounce dreams, endure suffocating routines, all in the name of a promise of stability that rarely fulfills itself. The result is resentment. Resentment against the partner, against society, against ourselves for having chosen mediocrity instead of courage. This is the truth Nietzsche exposes without mercy. Marriage, when lived as escape, isn't love, but decadence. But it's not at this point that the philosopher wants to leave us. His philosophy isn't mere nihilism, but a summons to creation. If marriage reveals our illusions, this doesn't mean we should reject it completely. It means rather that we should recreate it from lucidity. The path of liberation lies in assuming transitoriness, risk, imperfection, and still choosing, not from fear or convenience, but from strength. Liberation, in this sense, isn't in fleeing the institution, but in transforming it. Getting married can be an act of courage when it's not moved by illusions, but by consciousness. When two human beings unite, knowing that love is fragile, that desire is passing, that routine threatens, and that power will always be at play. And even so, they decide to walk together, not as possessions, but as companions of creation. This is the marriage Nietzsche could consider worthy. Not social prison, but union between strong spirits who challenge each other mutually. The great danger, according to him, is seeking in the other the salvation we don't have courage to conquer within ourselves. True love and true marriage is only possible when each individual already stands on their feet before life, capable of bearing solitude, capable of creating meaning by themselves. Only this way is union not escape, but choice. When marriage is born from strength, it can become a field of spirit expansion, not its grave. Nietzsche believed life is only worthwhile when faced as creation, and perhaps matrimony, in its most elevated form, is exactly that. Two existential artists molding together a work in constant movement. There are no guarantees, no assured eternity, no certainties, but there's intensity, transformation, and courage. This is liberation, living without illusions, but with potency. The question that remains is inevitable. To what extent is your vision of marriage the fruit of authentic choices? And to what extent is it just repetition of inherited patterns? Are you living the truth of your life, or hiding in the comfortable lie of a tradition? Facing these questions can be painful, but it's the only way to transform the relationship into something that doesn't imprison, but liberates. What we learn on this journey is that marriage for Nietzsche is simultaneously danger and possibility. Danger when it becomes social prison, love mask, or suffocating routine. Possibility when it's lived with lucidity, courage, and creativity as a field of growth and mutual challenge. The dark truth is that we often marry for the wrong reasons. Liberation is discovering that even so, we can recreate this bond into something grandiose. And now I ask you, what was the illusion about marriage that most imprisoned you until today? Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us in this community that seeks to think beyond appearances. Thank you for being here, sharing this deep philosophical journey. Until our next encounter.